Hello, my name is Matthew, and Steve and I have another read along going on for the month of July for our book club, the Mayberry Book Club turned real. And for July, we decided to read Batman Year One. This is again by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli with Richard Lewis. And this is Steve making it up to me for our last read along. That was a graphic novel, uh, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, which fell apart. And so we're back at reading a graphic novel, and we're on part two. This is Batman and Jim Gordon coming into their own, their first year in Gotham City, trying to turn the city around. And in part one, Jim Gordon and Batman, Bruce Wayne, have these parallel stories on a strict timeline. It begins in January. Part two is going to begin April 4th, so really the second quarter of the year. But in part one, we follow this parallel storyline of both of them getting acclimated to the city and the evils of the city, the crime, and then also the political and police corruption. So these two levels where the city is just falling apart, and Jim Gordon is now witnessing and having interactions with corrupt police officers all the way up the chain to the police commissioner. It ends with him taking a beating from the other officers, and then Jim Gordon having his retribution. And then we're also following Bruce Wayne trying to make some impact on Gotham City's crime. His decision is that he wants to be a crime fighter, very ambiguously with his, I think it was 12 years abroad. He was training and turning his body into a lethal weapon with all sorts of martial arts and scare tactics, but didn't have an in. He wasn't sure how how he was going to do it, and he thought he needed some kind of presentation. He wanted to scare these bad guys. He wanted to scare the crime out of the city. And it ends with Bruce Wayne, the bat breaking through his window. He had a terrible first encounter on a reconnaissance mission. He's been shot, stabbed, he's bleeding to death, and he calls for Alfred. So we know not only is he going to be saved, but he has a plan. And this is the beginning of chapter 2, and the title is War is Declared. And we have this amazing photograph. It's Bruce Wayne putting on his cape. And this isn't a costume or outfit that's armored and militarized. This is just skin tight fabric, just and we see it's an early effort for a costume, I think. Very well done, though. You see that bat symbol. And so it begins. We're back following Jim Gordon. He's been there for a few months. He's been ruffling up feathers and getting on people's nerves, stepping on toes. And he's on his way after being interrupted, having a nice night with his wife who's pregnant with a child. He has to leave because there has been a hostage situation. And I read this twice. The first time I read it, I thought, this is kind of cliche. There's going to be the hostage situation, a whole squad of police cars, the SWAT team shows up. We find out that the Gotham City SWAT team is brutal. We have one little detail that the last time that the SWAT team came down on some area of the city, not even the statues were standing. So they're this wrecking ball, a sledgehammer arm of the police force. And of course, Jim Gordon is speeding through, breaking up the barricades, almost hitting people, getting out, having to stop the whole situation from escalating. The SWAT team's all upset, and single-handedly, Jim Gordon is going to be the negotiator, the hostage negotiator. He holds up through the window. This psychotic guy is up there holding a little girl hostage, and he sees Jim Gordon drop the gun. So he goes upstairs, goes into the building upstairs, unarmed, knocks on the door, and the guy opens the door, and Jim Gordon punches his lights out. Saves the girl. And it's a bit of a cliche. I was thinking about this. It just occurred to me how it so closely parallels this nearly the same situation that happened in Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, where there's a hostage situation, but now it's the veteran, older Batman who has to break it up. And Batman punches through the wall, rips a person through the wall, beats everybody mercilessly, and as far as you can tell, with a gun, shoots and kills one of the perpetrators, and then saves the day. And so that is a very nice mirroring parallel between the styles of a young Jim Gordon and a veteran, kind of pessimistic, broken old Batman from another comic. And then we get, I should show this. So he leaves. He goes home. Jim Gordon de-escalates this hostage situation, and he saves the girl. And he's at home, and he's sitting in bed next to his sleeping pregnant wife, and he goes, "I pray he's very strong and smart enough to stay alive," talking about his unborn child. "How did I let this happen? How did I screw up so badly to bring an innocent child to life in a city without hope?" The next panel. Batman. It's our first scene of Batman in costume. It's a wide, open angle of the city of Gotham with a little bit of hope. It's amazing. And then we get kind of a random first outing of the proper Batman. It's these teenagers who are burglarizing apartments. They're going through the outside catwalks, the fire escapes, and of course it doesn't go well. He lands. There's a bunch of teenagers. One of the kids almost falls off the fire escape, and we get the kind of nod that Batman doesn't kill people. He's holding this child, this teenager, by the ankle. The other scared kids are kind of beating up this crazy Batman, and barely he's able to save the kid. He knocks everybody out, but it was a pitiful, at least first sighting for us of Batman. Right after that, in contrast, we're back in the police precinct, and more time has gone by. A few weeks have gone by, and we get that little note that he was starting Batman was starting on these really low level, minor kinds of crimes, which does make a lot of sense. He's not going to be fighting supervillains straight away. So maybe kind of shaking the shoulders of these little kids um, has a certain logic to it, just kind of getting his footing. And very quickly we find out that he's actually rising through the ranks, going all over the city for hours each night and causing a scene, a stir. It's getting on the news. People are hearing about a giant bat. This idea that he had at the beginning about striking fear is working, not on the criminals alone. The first time we have this kind of ruckus talk of Batman is in the police precinct. So the corrupt aspect of the city is almost more nervous than the criminals. We don't get much of the criminals shaking in their boots. We have the corrupt police force. Jim Gordon, who's the good guy, is also concerned because he has a vigilante running around, and we have whatever his name was, is it Flash or Flask? Flass, Detective Flass, who beat up Jim Gordon in the first issue. It was our kind of first step in the door of the corruption of the Gotham City Police Department. And he's got a neck brace on, presumably from getting beat up by Jim Gordon in the first issue. And he tells this preposterous story of there was going to be this big cocaine bust. And he was like, I was there. I was right about to break up this big cocaine bust. And a giant bat shows up. He's out of his mind with fear and thinks that there's a giant bat creature. And he goes, I was about to disarm one of the drug dealers, but before I could disarm him, he shoots the Batman, goes right through his body, and we have this great image. Look at that. So it goes through the cape. He's throwing darts out of his fingers, and so he's there, like in cahoots with these drug dealers to get the cocaine throughout the city. It gets busted up by Batman, and now he's like changing his story. It's ridiculous. And immediately we're straight at the top of the corruption of Gotham City. We're at the police commissioner's house. He's there with was it Falcone or Falcone, like the mobsters, the upper echelon of the crime world, and they're completely the criminals are completely dismissing Batman's activity, unlike the low-level police officers who are actually quite concerned. We have Batman outside doing a reconnaissance, or doing a setup. He's scouting out this big mansion where they're having this fancy corrupt dinner, and he's taking out the security around the perimeter. He's listening in. He's hearing that he keeps hearing Jim Gordon's name coming up, and thinks, well, maybe he's a good guy. And he's like doing all of his preparation, because Batman is known for being able to handle any situation with enough prep time. And he like blows up the window, throws in these smoke bombs, and I wonder if I could find it. Look at this amazing. It's incredible. It's really amazing artwork. And this is Batman. Ladies and gentlemen, you have eaten well. You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit. Your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe. And the police commissioner, while Jim Gordon earlier was asking for more manpower, trying to figure out what's going on with this vigilante, the person at the top wanted to dismiss it. The criminals weren't really bothered by this guy. And so now that he's had his house blown up and a threat made from this bat creature, like, so like the next scene, the next panel is the police commissioner dragging Jim Gordon and going, "You better get this Batman or it's your head." And so we see these. There's a handful of these kinds of things, these panels, where Jim Gordon is trying to have these mock criminal situations. So a girl's gonna walk down the street and get mugged, or things like that, and Batman is like in the shadows, going like, "Whoa, she actually walks too well," and those people over there, those are two police officers, and there's the detective over there, and so it's like spy versus spy. Both people are onto each other, or at least Batman's onto them. Jim Gordon's trying to catch them, cat and mouse situation, and it goes on. The other thing which I'm curious about, two things I'm curious about so far up to part two. Jim Gordon is now trying to figure out who Batman is, and he thinks maybe it's Dent. Dent's gonna go on to become Two-Face, but right now he's the district attorney, and he's young, well built, kind of like a strapping young man, and Jim Gordon has a little bit of an interrogation, like, "Where have you been on these nights?" He has weights in his office, and he's like, "You work out?" And but Batman, as far as I can tell, it doesn't have an explanation, but Batman is like in the office there, and we don't get an interaction between Dent and Batman yet, so I'm very curious about that. Also, Jim Gordon is like flirting with the office assistant, this you can see this girl here. She lights a cigarette for him and hands it to him provocatively. He can taste the lipstick on the cigarette butt. She's putting her hands on his knee. He's not pulling his knee away. Then we get sort of another cliche moment. There's a runaway truck. The driver has been incapacitated for some unknown reason, and so it's just flying down the street. Jim Gordon in the cop car realizes this, and he is going to try to jump out of his car and jump onto the truck. And then, of course, there's a little old lady with a cart walking, oblivious to the world around her, just in the middle of the night, walking down the street. If the thing would have gone on longer, there would have been two men carrying a pane of glass. But Batman has to swoop down and save the girl. The cart gets smashed up by the truck. Jim Gordon somehow stops the truck, and then the assistant of Jim Gordon now has Batman laying on the street. She has him at gunpoint, so she's caught Batman. And there's an escape. Batman gets shot again. Runs down a blind alley, breaks into this window, and the SWAT team gets called again. And so the SWAT team earlier on, we were told, is like the most brutal arm of Gotham City. They just level things. And Gordon's on the horn saying, Batman hasn't hurt anybody, don't call the SWAT team. Meanwhile, Batman's in the building going, "If I can just get to the roof, now I gotta have an escape plan." Before he can even get up to the top, not only are the helicopters above and the building surrounded, they blow it up. This helicopter, like in the middle of the city, I guess, just drops a bomb on a building. And so this is the last panel, and this so far the comic is just full of amazing visuals. And so we have this SWAT team Now they're, I guess, going through the rubble, and we have a silhouette in the background. So it's like Batman stalking his prey. It's incredible. And I can't wait for part three. I'll read the little kind of opening few. They each have this, I don't even know what you call it, but this little enticement. So this is what we have coming. They've got him cornered. They've got him outnumbered. They've got him trapped. They are in trouble. And just like part one, it's really entertaining. Some of the specific situations are these kind of well worn storylines, having a hostage situation, catching burglars, um, breaking up a dinner party, um, saving the little old lady in front of the runaway truck. Um, but just like any of those things, all these old storylines that everybody knows, it comes down to how well it's executed. And very quickly, there's a lot of it in this sort of far-flung world. Um, there's grounded, believable characters living through this. Gordon now is this perplexing, really complicated figure. We have his personal life, his professional life, his grim view of the city compared to the noble nature of his actions. We have him concerned about his wife and child while he's at work flirting um, with another woman. It's a fleshed out portrait of an imperfect man. Batman, I actually feel like so far is still very much in the shadows, not as fleshed out. With Jim Gordon, his motivations um, just follow along very nicely. Um, Batman's motivation for wanting to be a crime fighter at all, I feel like hasn't been touched on very much. It's unless, um, except for relying on the backstory that everybody knows, and this comic just sort of presents that his parents were murdered in front of his eyes when he was a child, and therefore he's going to be Batman. Doesn't matter as much. It would almost be disappointing to get some specific example of, as an adult, what turned his head to crime fighting. I think it's very smart to focus on Jim Gordon and the parallels between Bruce Wayne and Batman, and Jim Gordon. And I also like the levels of there's crime through the city and corruption through the city, and the interaction between that is really good. So that's what I'll say for now. Really great fun, impressive. The artwork is just gorgeous. It's the kind of art that you just want to sit and look at for a while and spend time with. You can read this whole thing in in a half hour. I'm sure each part you could read in you could read in 10, 15 minutes, but you want to spend 30 minutes to an hour just enjoying how well these panels are. I mean, I just showed that one, but that's incredible. That's what I'll say for now. So that's part two of Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. Looking forward to hearing what Steve has to say. Anyone else that's participating, please let me know what you think. anyone that's read it, let me know what you think, or whatever my thoughts are, if you have any thoughts on what I had to say. So thank you for watching, and take care.